police reform is the foremost issue here, but politics ain't far behind. Economics ain't far behind. Healthcare ain't far behind. And I suspect that animosity towards the current administration is part of the fuel here. Will all the people in the streets make sure they're registered and vote? Maybe I want to suspect, yes, that there is a real desire for change even broader than police reform, and that it's going to spill over into the election, assuming that people can make their way to the polls. I think we see some indication of that in Milwaukee a couple months ago, in Georgia recently, where the election system clearly was broken and the lines were around the block, and we're middle of COVID. And you'd think, you know, are people so jaded and anti-government that why in the world would they stand in line for 3 or 4 hours? But they did. And so I do think that this is also the tip of an underlying electoral related political movement.
All the elected officials have an eye on, November. Here in Memphis, elected officials on the city council and the school board and the county commission who, 2 years ago never would have mentioned the words economic inequality, right? Are signing on to, fairly, relatively bold statements about, how we need to move forward in terms of addressing these inequalities, right? The Shelby County School Board, they just voted and said, yes, every child in the district needs access to a wireless device, right? Particularly if we're going to go, if we're not back in the fall, right? Everybody needs access to wireless device and internet, right? And so this had been so the internet issue had been a non-starter for the last couple of years, right? Too expensive, violation of federal rules, blah, blah, blah. But, this moment has created an opportunity, has given a lot of people some political space to make some pushes that, had not been, they did not feel they were, empowered to make in a previous moment. It begs the question, right? Does Mitch McConnell, if it's 2017 and all of this is jumping off, right? Does Mitch McConnell, write up some legislation about police reform as opposed to it being an election year? Right? And he's up for re-election. The party that really can't afford any sort of silence in this moment, right, is the Democratic Party, right? And so we've seen all manners of, from the sublime to the ridiculous, right? The kente cloth, kneeling, all that other kind of stuff, political theater at its best or worst, but also aggressive legislation. This legislation, do we see this same legislation coming out of the Democratic caucus of the House if it's 2017 and not 2020? Right? Or if it's 2022 and not 2020, right? So yeah, the election definitely matters, right? And the calculations that people are making are certainly a function of the fact that that we're getting ready to jump into an election cycle, probably the likes of which we have not seen.
If somehow someone could wave a magic wand and police reform went into effect tomorrow, would this movement end? And I don't think so. I think it is pushing bigger questions of systematic racism, of economic inequality, of insufficient and unequal health care. And so it's hard to divorce it from the other politics of the day. And I do think it has a electoral / political dimension that goes beyond police reform.